Welcome to the Intelligent Border, Fast, Agile, Secure, a FedGov Today special program presented by EY. I'm the host of FedGov Today, Francis Rose, coming to you from the EY Center for Government Modernization. On this program, you'll learn how technology is evolving to help border enforcement professionals meet their missions. You'll learn the best practices that are helping those pros apply the new tech to the work they do. And you'll hear how Customs and Border Protection's migration to the cloud facilitates the evolving technology that feeds the data border pros need to do their jobs faster and better. First, though, to tell you about that tech and data evolution from a little different perspective, George Kaczmarskyj is principal for the government and public sector at EY. George, welcome. Thanks for joining me. You were on FedGov Today recently talking about looking at the issues that government's trying to solve from a commercial perspective. What do you see in the commercial world that's applicable to what's going on with data and technology evolution?
Sure. And thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be back. I think one of the biggest things that we can learn from the other industries is their journey around advanced analytics and now the analogous impact of that on AI. And the investments we've seen acutely in financial services around preparing for the AI and advanced analytics usage in their investments in data is probably one of the biggest things we can take away from it.
Mm-hmm. What is financial services looking at that parallels what government agencies, especially law enforcement agencies, have to look at?
Sure. You know, one of the interesting stories in financial services was back in the 2008 financial crash, we learned something really important. And the way financial services organizes, they think about front, middle, and back office functions. It's very analogous for us in mission support, and enterprise functions and systems. And what we learned from the crash was we weren't talking to each other. We weren't collaborating about the data. We weren't sharing the data among those different functions, and it limited our ability to get the insights and advanced analytics around our exposure in the capital markets, and we failed. The regulators took a look at it and said, hey, you know, we have a systemic problem here. We need to invest in data as an enterprise asset. That has since allowed us over the next decade and a half to prepare ourselves for using data in a much more efficient and impactful way. I think if we make the similar investments we saw in financial services and government, we'll accelerate that use of data and prepare us better for the AI agenda.
What are the specific investments that you recommend, and what's the delta between what you've seen that agencies have and are doing now versus what they would look like in a more mature end state?
Sure. The ultimate outcome we're trying to get to is trust in the data. And trust is measured in a few different ways, right? It's in the integrity and the data quality. It's in the accessibility of the data. All of that matters, right? And if we have that, we can use it without question. To get there, I think there are probably three big investments financial services made. And it's all around people, process, and technology. The first is in the discipline of data governance. So what's the accountability structure? Who owns the data? Where does it sit, et cetera? The second was around all things data quality, putting in place the tools, technologies, policies, actions to be able to measure and constantly improve that data quality. And last, not surprisingly, it was all around investments in architecture. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that later in the segment, but you know, the tools and infrastructure that went around for storing and rationalizing and making data accessible were paramount to that journey.
Where did FinServ learn that the difficulties existed in implementing policy and process along each of those three areas?
So, not surprising, it's in the soft side of it.
Yeah.
The technology is pretty, it's pretty mechanical. You can figure that out and apply it. It's in the operating model, in the policy decisions. It's in the prioritization of which data do we really need to look at. The data problem is quite significant. It's growing every day. And where do we put our energies and investments into which parts of the data life cycle were pretty big.
A lot of data pros in government use the fixing the airplane while you're flying it analogy when they're talking about data governance and data curation. Is that getting better in your view in the federal government? Or agencies getting better at ingesting huge quantities of data, but also being able to curate it and go back into the archives and make sure that what they have meshes well with what they're collecting now?
I think by and large, yes. I think it's getting better. But I do think that the rate of data creation And our ability to navigate that data is becoming a bigger and bigger problem for us. And so going back to what we talked about financial services, where they had to prioritize which data mattered the most to the mission, in that case, about our liquidity analysis, we need to apply those similar prioritization in our own missions in the government.
All right, George, you stay here. We'll pick up on that later in the conversation. We'll take a quick break, and then you'll meet a CBP leader who's helping build and harden the infrastructure the agency needs to deliver its mission when the intelligent border continues in a moment. Welcome back to the Intelligent Border, Fast, Agile, Secure, coming to you from the EY Center for Government Modernization. More than 140 Border Patrol stations and 328 ports of entry are under the jurisdiction of Customs and Border Protection. More than 85% of the applications the agency uses and more than 40% of their databases are in the cloud now. Mark James, Executive Director of the Enterprise Cloud Services Division at CBP, is here to talk about that work. George Kaczmarskyj of EY is back too. Gentlemen, welcome. Mark, thanks for being here today. How did you set about developing a strategy and then implementing that strategy to build the infrastructure that you needed to service all of those points of entry and ports?
Thank you for having me. Great to be back. We started this journey in 2017, with just a vision to move out of the cloud. We were following the Federal Data Center Consolidation Act and also the Cloud First, Cloud Smart initiatives. From that point, we had a clear goal out of our legacy data center into cloud by 2019. It was 2017. We had, as you stated before, we had 276 plus applications to migrate in, with a very low plan and a lot of not as much innovation regarding cloud. Our agency was very at the infancy of really understanding how cloud worked, how it was going to work for us. So we pillared it into three buckets: small, the low-hanging fruit applications that could migrate easy, the new applications that we wanted to build into cloud, and then also some of the legacy applications that we could bring the data with. We ran into a large problem. As we started to move in, we realized that cloud was a little bit more of a challenge to us than we believed. We understood that data was probably going to be our largest issue. So we aggressively moved application layer. We actually built a cloud instantiation on-prem in support of those who couldn't move as fast. So from a tiering perspective, we had programs that could move fast and rapidly. We had programs that moved very slow. And here we are today in 2025. 85% of all applications in, as you stated, 40+%, but that represents 25 plus petabytes of data.
Wow.
And the challenge there is not only in support of application development, we are also embarking on the AI and the data analytics that resides behind that data and kind of changing our mindset of how we want to move data into the cloud.
Yeah, and I think what I noted in reading the material from your colleagues at CBP, it's databases. It's not just this mass hulk of data, a huge pool of stuff that's there. It sounds to me with the term databases that it's structured in some way that you're able to use it when you need it to make decisions. Is that a fair read?
Very fair. It's the structured Oracle databases, it's IBM DB2, it's some of our legacy. Our challenge is making that unstructured, going to more non-relational type data stores, using the cloud database infrastructure, and also data lake and data lakehouse technologies to support. That's the conversion we're making. CBP, I heard George earlier speak about his challenges. How has that migration happened with data? CBP and all of government has changed dramatically. At our organization, we brought on a CDO. Majority of the organizations have stood up CDO offices within their organizations, and we're working together to kind of bring those strategies together and actually have a plan moving forward. Post 9/11, post 2000, 2001, DHS was initiated. we, just like the financial organizations, realized that we weren't sharing data. We understood that data in other agencies was siloed, not only in legacy data stores, but we just weren't communicating. So we're much better off right now. We kind of have a coalition of data, and the challenge of bringing the data all into one pool that supports CBP, not only CBP, but DHS, outside of DHS and some of our, ICC communities is definitely been beneficial over the last 8 to 10 years.
George, when you think about an organization like DHS, of which CBP is an important component, and there is a lot of information, a lot of data moving from organization to organization. Organization A collects it, but B might need to look at it at some point. What are the lessons learned there from the commercial sector about exchanging information within an organization and sometimes even outside an organization?
Yeah, I think there are probably a few things there. One I would say is just an enterprise mindset that it's an asset owned by everyone in the organization, not one individual department. That is a pretty big cultural shift we've seen in other industries. But once you kind of free the data, if you will, it becomes more accessible. I think there's another element that as a owner, if you will, or steward of that data, probably more appropriately, that you recognize the different points of usage and you're trying to support all of those different accessible points. And so there are steps and processes that those data stewards can put in place to work with the different business owners of how to measure it, when to make it available, probably change databases and structures where we can access it a little better, et cetera.
One of the things that we talked about last time you and I had a conversation, Mark, there's two concepts you told me were very important when you were building this infrastructure that have paid off for you, and that's agility and scalability. How in particular have those two aspects paid dividends in the way that you're able to access, analyze, use data to make decisions?
Look, agility and scalability is probably paramount in what we're doing at CBP. It's not only affected the mission, it affected our ability to deliver capabilities out to the mission. You see it today with all the tax tariffs, the tariffs changing daily. We at CBP, we are making those changes within minutes of announcement. It's pretty much amazing. We're able to scale up to support any initiative that's coming from the administration or coming from CBP. And only cloud is probably more capable to handle that. In the past, it would have been more of a sunk cost, a procurement, and then an isolation, and then the instantiation of the environment. With the modernization of CBP, these initiatives and changes are just as rapid and fast-paced, and also accountable to the mission. We're able to track with financial operations and management at a very low level. So when I hear faster, secure, more affordable, as my CIO would state, more affordable to me means cost accountability. I can identify down to the penny how much the mission offices are utilizing within the platform, and also can scale up and scale down and use those resources when they're not needed.
George, one of the things that you and I talked about in the first part of this program was that idea that Mark just touched on, and that is getting data when you need it. You used it, you framed it as knowing which data matters.
Right.
How are you seeing organizations, both in the commercial sector and in the work that you're doing in the public sector, how are you seeing organizations decide what data matters, when it matters, and what to do with it when it does and doesn't matter?
Yeah. I think you think about it maybe in two different categories, like the defensive side and the offensive side, right? The defensive side of data, like what do we need to do to protect the enterprise and the key mission objectives that we have within there. And then I think the offensive side, which is how can we think ahead? How can we build analytics? What insights can we see coming? And it's more exploratory in nature. So defensive side, we can take a look at the processes and we map out which data do I need to affect those processes that are in place. The offensive side is how can I envision where we're going and explore data. And so as Mark talked about the agility and scalability of the environment he's built, it's exactly for the offensive side of the equation, because I got to nimbly react to what if scenarios and different insights that may come out from the data that we don't even know we have a lot of times in our environment.
Commercial sectors struggled with the same cybersecurity issues too that federal government agencies have struggled with. What have they done regarding securing these data reserves that they have that maybe federal agencies could learn from?
I think one of the things, aside from all the technology that you're going to put in place and cloud infrastructure in there, I think classification of that data and then the metadata around it, so that you understand just where it fits into the type of classification or security you need. But then equally as important, like, how can I use it, right? Can this department, we talked about freeing the data earlier, but in some cases we may not want to free the data. It's actually sensitive for a variety of reasons. In financial services, that may be PII. In government, we have different levels of sensitivity we have to manage around.
You laid out the timeline earlier that you followed to achieve what you've done in the cloud, Mark. 2017 when you started, 2019 when you reached a point of maturity. Zero trust wasn't really a thing. It's a big thing now. How did you accommodate whatever might be coming down the pike, which turned out to be zero trust from a security perspective, in your original strategy? And where are you on your zero trust journey today?
Interesting enough, at that same time, DHS was pulling out policy for CDM, continuous data monitoring, and we were always aligning to that because the pillars of zero trust, it includes authentication, authorization, monitoring, automation, et cetera. So our zero trust journey was quite interesting because we were a perimeter-based security model, data center. Once you're in, then you can kind of move around freely. But that model is definitely changed. There's trust no one, trust every movement. Cloud has enabled us to actually put zero trust in all layers of our movement and data. Also, with authentication and authorization, we use tools such as Okta in our front end and authorization services in support of our zero trust model. I also wanted to tap on something George mentioned earlier about data. One of our larger challenges is that data now is not only within the cloud, it's at the edge. I mean, we stood up a operational technology organization just to support not only the mission needs of our field officers and stakeholders, but put the data out to them as close to the operator as possible. Also ingest artificial intelligence out there on top of the data, understand what's needed to come all the way back to the organization, what can reside at the near and far edge. So our data challenges and security around it has extended not only within cloud and in data center, it's extended out into the edge environments, and we have to implement those same methods to the edge devices just as much as we have to do in a traditional data center and/or cloud.
So my takeaway from the last time that you and I talked, that subject of edge computing came up, and my takeaway from that was strategically, it sounded like what you're doing is very similar to what the military does.
Absolutely.
When they talk about computing at the edge and security of that data at the edge, trying to connect endpoints so that the data doesn't have to go from the port back to HQ and then out to another location, so that those nodes are all connected together. Is that the right?
1,000%. This is not a new problem. I mean, this is similar to the military, but our southwest, our northern border, our Alaskan border, and our virtual borders as well. Access to, we're looking at technologies that assist with connectivity. Connectivity is a big challenge for not only the military, but for Border Patrol as well. And those are some of the key initiatives that we are ingesting with edge computing. Edge computing is just not only a buzzword, but we are attaching sensor data. I mean, we're probably a little bit approaching the maturity level of a military for sensor data, whether it be ground, visual, camera, you name it, attaching AI on top of that, building models, AI models on top of that, all that information, and making sense of it to the operator where they can make fast action decisions at the point of contention.
That sensor data is something that you tipped me before our conversation today, George, is tremendously important in a number of commercial sectors. Energy, you mentioned, was one, and there are others. What's the analogy there to what commercial organizations are doing, to what folks like Mark and his colleagues at CBP are up to?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you talked about the edge computing, and for sure, yourselves and defense are leading in that area. But there are other industries like oil and gas and energy and utilities with wind farms, solar farms, offshore, having real-time streaming of sensor data to predict mean time between failures or worst case nefarious behavior on that. You're doing that on the electric grid. The smart meters are pulling lots of real-time sensor feeds. Travel and transportation, you look at the cruise lines, the closest there is they are disconnected. I wouldn't say it's a contested environment, perhaps, as much as you might see, but I think there are learnings that we can take from those. As far as video, and you talked about that's another whole area of interest, but for shipping right now has become really important, not just knowing where the ships are, but how do you protect the ships in different environments in the sea that may be, pirates or otherwise coming in. So I do think there are some learnings of those industries have been dealing with different exam questions, but could be brought forward to government as well.
And it strikes me too, George, the collecting of all of that sensor data information is maybe different than organizations are used to doing.
Right.
A lot of it is different formats and so on. Does that present a problem for the collation and curation of that data, or is data and different types of data can be managed and governed in the same ways that organizations have done?
I think you have very different types of data. We talked about structured and unstructured, but I think streaming data is stale very quickly, right? Sensor data is relevant for a brief period of time. Patterns in sensor data, though, however, can become very important. So, thoughts around how do we aggregate and build alerts or insights from that data become important. But, streaming data is very voluminous. I mean, it'll destroy our petabyte projections very quickly, right? And we learned that with web analytics in the early days of the internet, right? And now, as we're seeing it with edge computing, we have to deal with it differently. And like I said, I think there's a real-time component that you get good insights from, and then there's a historical aggregation of that data that becomes important for pattern analysis.
Mark, another technology that people weren't talking about at all in 2017, 2019, when you began your cloud journey is artificial intelligence. You mentioned AI a moment ago. What has the cloud meant for you in terms of laying an AI platform for CBP to work from?
It's been immensely successful at CBP. We are utilizing not only the data platforms, things such as Databricks and some of those back-end data, large data lakes and data lake houses, but we're also using the AI modeling tools, SageMaker, Vertex AI, the ones on the cloud service providers, and we've been able to build cloud AI models and deploy AI models very rapidly, as opposed to what used to be build an AI model on your desktop, you deploy it out. Cloud has been able to kind of deploy to the mission fast, evolved immensely. It's been one of our largest successes is AI. Our problem right now is, kind of AI governance. How do we control that animal as it expands out? So many individuals want to use AI, not only just our core development teams and our core mission architects, but also our citizen development. We have a number of, Border Patrol officers, some OFO officers that are using AI for various tasks. So the explosion of AI has changed the trajectory of cloud. It's changed at least my strategy on how we wanted to build cloud. It's in a data environment, and how do we control and manage that? And some of the capabilities, whether it be in chipsets or advanced technology within performance, is in cloud as opposed to in the data center, which we could not keep up with.
You anticipated my next question, which is how are you thinking about technologies that may be coming, and what did you learn? What are you learning for how to do that from what you experienced from the AI development?
Yeah, what we're learning is, the technologies they land in cloud or co-location facilities first. We're learning that, we can utilize some of our partners to initiate these things, as opposed to building out, a sunk cost delivery. We are definitely at a different point. In the past, we probably would have built our own AI environment at one of our data centers, but based on cloud, based on some of our service providers, some of our partners, they're delivering the services for us, and we're just using them as managed services or offerings to us. Yeah, George brought up a earlier point about sensor data. You asked him about video management, and video management was kind of a challenge to us as well, because it's not only the sensor data, it's the protocols.
Yeah.
Understanding all the protocols associated with what the data, how the data is coming in. We've run into that challenge. So partnering up with industry to let them know that, hey, look, we need you to work together to be able to feed and service each other together. That has been one of our largest challenges with sensor data and bringing sensor data in.
If you had a chance to sit down with somebody like Mark at any agency, CBP or some other place, what would you advise them to think about, George, that in the next 18 to 24, 36 months is something that they might not be top of mind for them today, but is coming or could be coming, and is something that they should start to plan for and make arrangements for today?
I'm going to pick up on something Mark talked about earlier, which is the edge. I think the AI at the edge introduces very interesting challenges for us, right? You talked about video at the edge. Think of a drone flying over doing surveillance. We may not be able to push all that video down. How do we manage that? And I think there's a really interesting parallel with autonomous vehicles that have been going on with autonomous driving in cars right now, and how we taught the neural networks to operate and use the video feeds in the cars to make decisions without having to go back to the cloud. And they have to do that in real time. And so I think that's going to be a fascinating challenge for us as we go forward, and I think there'll be some interesting things there. The other thing I would caution is don't ignore the infrastructure elements of this, and I don't mean just the technology. I think the stuff that you've talked about in the cloud is fantastic. The infrastructures there helping us, but it's the stuff that's maybe not as exciting around the people and process. We talked about data governance and AI governance. Those things are going to be Achilles' heels unless we invest the time right now and get ahead of it. So.
George, Mark, thank you both very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And thank you for watching The Intelligent Border, Fast, Agile, Secure, a FedGov Today special program presented by EY. If you missed any part of this program, you can watch the show in its entirety on our website at fedgovtoday.com or the FedGov Today YouTube channel. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching. Good night.